The stale scent of burnt coffee clung to the air in Granny's diner, a place that time seemed to have forgotten, much like its elder patrons. Dust motes danced in the weak morning sunbeams, illuminating the chipped formica tables and worn red vinyl booths. A faint, almost imperceptible hum emanated from the ancient refrigerators, a testament to decades of tireless service. Jackson snarled, his voice a low rumble amplified by the distant rev of his customized Harley-Davidson outside, a throaty growl that promised trouble. "Get out of my way, old man," he spat, his impatience a tangible force in the quiet diner. His leather-clad arm, heavy and calloused from years of gripping handlebars and who knew what else, swung out with a sudden, brutal force. A ceramic mug of lukewarm coffee spun through the air, arcing gracefully before shattering on the checkered linoleum floor, sending dark liquid splattering like an ugly stain. The slap echoed, a sharp, sickening crack that cut through the mundane clatter of plates and hushed conversations, leaving an unnatural silence in its wake. Robert Miller, a man whose 70-something years sat etched in the deep lines around his kind, tired eyes, stumbled, his knuckles white as he gripped the worn edge of the table, struggling to stay upright. His vision blurred for a moment, the diner tilting precariously around him. A collective gasp rippled through the diner. A young waitress, Ashley, her eyes wide with shock and a burgeoning fear, dropped her tray with a clatter, ceramic shards scattering like shattered dreams across the tile. The sound of breaking china was usually a common occurrence here, but this time, it felt like a punctuation mark, a loud declaration of something profoundly wrong. Every eye in the room was fixed on the scene, every breath held. No one moved. No one dared. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken fear and indignation, a suffocating blanket of apprehension. Robert, his face a mask of quiet shock and pain, slowly turned, his head throbbing. A vivid red welt blossomed on his cheek, a stark, angry contrast to his pale, aged skin. His hands, gnarled with age and the memory of distant battles, trembled ever so slightly, a tremor that only he truly felt, but his gaze remained steady, unwavering, holding an intensity that seemed to defy his years and the recent indignity. He didn't utter a single word. With a quiet dignity that seemed to defy the blatant disrespect, a dignity born of a lifetime of hardship and resilience, he reached for his worn baseball cap, the brim bearing a faded insignia that few recognized now, a subtle hint of a past many had forgotten. He resettled it on his head with a precise, almost ritualistic motion, as if donning an invisible shield. Then, with a sigh that was barely audible, a sound of profound weariness that spoke volumes, he sank back into his booth, a silent sentinel in a suddenly hushed room. His eyes, though, were fixed on the door, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. Jackson smirked, a cruel twist of his lips, and took a long, exaggerated sip from his own steaming mug, relishing the fear he'd instilled. "Washed-up soldiers and fake heroes," he muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear, his voice dripping with contempt. "Always in the way." His two cronies, Marcus and Todd, burly men with matching leather vests emblazoned with a snarling wolf logo, chuckled nervously, their eyes darting around the room, gauging the reactions. They weren't as comfortable with the raw aggression as Jackson was, their bravado more a performance than a true conviction. A young couple, Sarah and David, quickly ushered their two small children, Emily and Noah, towards the dimly lit exit, their faces etched with discomfort and concern, whispering reassurances to their terrified kids. The air in the diner remained thick with unspoken tension, a suffocating blanket of apprehension. What Jackson, in his arrogant self-importance, didn't know, what no one in that dusty diner could possibly have known, was the true identity of the man he'd just so casually humiliated. This wasn't just some nameless old man seeking a quiet breakfast. This was Robert Miller. He had faced down far worse than a crude biker. He had braved the frozen hellscapes of Korea, pulled comrades from the jaws of certain death under relentless enemy fire, and buried more friends than he could possibly count. His quiet life in this small town was a carefully constructed facade, a peaceful retirement earned through unimaginable sacrifice. The cap he wore, unassuming to the untrained eye, bore the proud, if faded, emblem of the 101st Airborne Division, a unit synonymous with courage and sacrifice, but also with quiet, deadly efficiency. But more profoundly, Robert wasn't alone. Oh no, not by a long shot. Because exactly 30 minutes earlier, in a quiet, almost ritualistic gesture that had become a cornerstone of his week, Robert had sent a text message. A simple, almost cryptic message, sent from an old, well-worn flip phone, same table. "Coffee is ready." It was a weekly Sunday ritual, a steadfast tradition they had maintained since the passing of Robert's beloved wife, Eleanor, a few years prior, a tradition born from grief but sustained by love and an unspoken bond. What the swaggering biker, lost in his own petty dominion, couldn't fathom was that Robert's son wasn't merely a man. He was Commander David Miller, a decorated officer in a branch of the military far more discreet than the obvious army fatigues. His quiet demeanor masked an iron will, a strategic mind honed by years of classified operations. And he absolutely never, ever traveled alone, especially not when meeting his father for their cherished Sunday coffee. The ancient diner clock ticked, its steady rhythm a stark contrast to the rapidly escalating tension. Jackson continued to laugh, oblivious to the storm rapidly brewing on the horizon, a storm that was about to break with an undeniable force, a force far beyond his comprehension. Outside, a low rumble began, growing steadily into a powerful roar that vibrated through the diner's old windows, rattling the cheap cutlery on the tables. Tires screeched, not in protest, but in precise, disciplined stops, each one a punctuation mark in the escalating suspense. Patrons at the diner windows turned, their faces morphing from confusion to a dawning awe, then to outright alarm. 8 military transport vehicles, dark and imposing, not the usual army Humvees, but sleek, armored SUVs with tinted windows and subtle, almost invisible, insignia, pulled up with a synchronized precision that spoke volumes about the discipline and training of their occupants. Then came the boots. Heavy, combat-ready boots, hitting the pavement with a rhythmic thud, each step perfectly in sync. 12 soldiers, clad in crisp, intimidating fatigues, but these were not standard issue, they were a darker shade of gray, almost black, perfectly tailored, blending into the shadows, filed into the diner with a silent, almost ethereal precision. Their movements were fluid, their expressions unreadable. The air in the room seemed to compress, weighted by their sheer presence, by the quiet hum of their tactical gear. At the very center of this disciplined formation strode a tall, imposing man in camouflage, his jaw set, his eyes, the color of flint, narrowed, scanning the room with an almost preternatural awareness. This was Commander David Miller, Robert's son. He didn't need to speak. He didn't need to issue commands. The entire diner had already fallen into a stunned silence, every breath held, every eye glued to him, anticipating what was to come. Jackson looked up, a flicker of genuine confusion in his eyes, his bravado momentarily faltering. He tried to laugh it off, a nervous, forced sound. "What the hell is this? You guys lost or something?" Looking for a bake sale, he sneered, though the tremor in his voice betrayed his rapidly growing unease. Commander Miller turned slowly, his gaze falling first on the angry red mark blossoming on his father's cheek. The color deepened visibly under his intense, cold stare, a silent accusation. Then, his eyes, hard as diamonds, swept to Jackson, lingering for a moment, an eternity of silent judgment. And then back to the mark, as if cementing the insult into his memory. His voice, when it came, was a low, dangerous growl, sharp enough to cut through the heavy silence, carrying an undeniable authority. "Who put hands on this man?" No one in the diner needed to answer with words. The collective gaze of every stunned patron pointed unmistakably at Jackson, who suddenly felt the full, crushing weight of their disapproval in the chilling presence of the silent soldiers. Jackson, attempting to regain some semblance of his lost bravado, forced another laugh, a hollow, unnatural sound that died in his throat. "Whoa, easy, man. I didn't know he was, what, your dad?" He was blocking the aisle, old people are always in the way. He never finished the sentence. Commander Miller stepped forward, each movement slow, deliberate, and undeniably menacing, like a predator stalking its prey. "That man," he began, his voice laced with an almost terrifying calmness, pointing a firm finger at Robert, "jumped from a chopper under enemy fire. He carried his best friend, 2 miles, with a bullet in his leg. He missed my birth because he was saving lives on foreign soil." He took another step, closing the distance, his presence radiating an almost palpable intensity, an aura of quiet power that made Jackson instinctively recoil. "And you think you get to slap him because you were in a hurry for pancakes?" Jackson stumbled backward, tripping over a chair, a look of genuine fear finally replacing his bravado, his face paling considerably. "Look, I didn't know, all right? It's not like it was personal," he stammered, sweat beading on his forehead, his tough exterior crumbling. Miller cut him off, his voice suddenly sharp, a whip crack in the silent room. "It is now." He snapped his fingers. One of the soldiers, a young woman with a stoic face and sharp, intelligent eyes, stepped forward. Not to harm Jackson, not yet, but to perform an unexpected service. She produced a small, insulated container and, with practiced ease, poured a crisp, new coffee, steaming and perfect, exactly how Robert liked it, into a clean mug. She placed it into his trembling hands. "Dad," Miller said, his voice softening just for a moment as he looked at his father, the familial warmth a stark contrast to his earlier intensity, "I brought the team." Robert looked up, the faintest hint of a smile gracing his lips, a twinkle returning to his eyes, a glint of the old warrior. "You always do," he murmured, his voice raspy, a hint of pride in his tone. Then, to the utter astonishment of everyone in the diner, something truly unexpected happened, a twist no one could have predicted. Robert Miller, the man who had just been slapped, slowly, deliberately, stood. He didn't demand revenge. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even look angry. He simply walked over to Jackson, who seemed to shrink under his steady gaze, and looked him dead in the eye, his gaze piercing. "I fought for your right to act like a fool," Robert said, his voice quiet but carrying an undeniable weight, a lifetime of experience in every syllable, "but I also earned the right to call you one. And you, son, are a fool." Jackson looked down, his cheeks burning red with a shame he couldn't hide, unable to meet the old man's unwavering gaze. "But you've still got a chance," Robert continued, his voice softening slightly, a flicker of an almost paternal concern in his eyes. "Every day you wake up is a second chance. Don't waste it. Acting tough? Real strength looks nothing like what you did today. It looks like facing your mistakes." There was nothing left to say. Jackson, utterly deflated, a broken shell of his former arrogance, sank back into his booth, the fight completely drained from him. His two friends, Marcus and Todd, had already quietly slipped out the side door, melting away into the afternoon, abandoning their humbled leader to face the music alone. Robert returned to his own booth, his son, Commander Miller, sitting silently across from him. The rest of the soldiers remained, forming a silent, respectful wall around them, a cordon of unwavering loyalty, their eyes constantly scanning the room, assessing, protecting. No orders were needed, no words exchanged. Just presence, a powerful, unspoken affirmation of respect and protection. Ashley, the waitress, stepped forward, tears welling in her eyes, finally released from the frozen fear and shock. She gently placed her hand on Robert's shoulder and whispered, "Thank you for everything." And then, spontaneously, without a single prompt, everyone in the diner stood. And this time, they applauded. It wasn't just for a soldier. It was for a father. A man of quiet dignity. A true hero who didn't need to shout to be heard. But the story wasn't quite over. As the applause died down, a sleek black sedan, unmarked but clearly official, pulled up outside. A man in a sharp suit, carrying a slim briefcase, stepped out. He looked directly at Commander Miller through the diner window. David Miller met his gaze, a subtle, almost imperceptible nod passing between them, a silent exchange of understanding. The commander then turned to his father, a hint of something complex in his eyes, pride, concern, but also a new kind of respect. "Dad," he began, his voice low, "there's one more thing. The Pentagon called. Not for me. For you. They want you back. For a special advisory role. Apparently, your old combat engineer expertise is suddenly crucial for a new, highly classified project. Something about advanced tunneling and counterinsurgency tactics that only a few veterans from your era truly mastered." Robert Miller, the quiet veteran who had simply wanted his Sunday coffee, blinked, a slow, incredulous smile spreading across his face, a spark of the old fire rekindling in his eyes. He looked from his son to the man in the suit, then back to the grateful faces in the diner, a new purpose dawning within him. After all these years, he mused, almost to himself, they remember. Life, it seemed, had a funny way of bringing you full circle, of pulling you back into the fray when you least expected it. And sometimes, the quietest heroes are given the loudest call to action, a call that reshapes not just their future, but perhaps the future of a nation. Suddenly, another vehicle, a nondescript white van, screeched to a halt outside, its side door sliding open. Two men, not soldiers, but grim-faced individuals in dark suits, quickly emerged, looking directly at Jackson. Their movements were swift, decisive. Jackson, who had just begun to gather his composure, looked up, his eyes widening in fresh panic. "Who are they?" he whispered, his voice trembling. Commander Miller simply raised an eyebrow. "Turns out," he said, his voice calm, "Jackson here has quite a few outstanding warrants. Assault, public disturbance, and a rather significant one for aggravated battery, from a few towns over. A pattern, it seems." The two men from the van, now identified as local law enforcement, entered the diner, their faces grim. "Jackson Cross," one of them stated, his voice flat. "You're under arrest." Jackson tried to protest, to stand, but his legs seemed to give out. Marcus and Todd, who had just stepped back inside, thinking the immediate danger had passed, quickly turned tail and fled, disappearing into the morning traffic. The officers calmly cuffed a shell-shocked Jackson and escorted him out. The crowd in the diner murmured, a collective sigh of relief, realizing the full scope of justice being served. As Jackson was led away, the man in the suit from the black sedan, Mr. Harrison, approached Robert's booth. "Mr. Miller," he said, extending a hand, "a true honor. Your reputation precedes you, even after all these years. We need your unique insights, sir. The world has grown complicated, and the lessons from Korea, from men like you, are more relevant than ever." Robert, shaking his hand, felt a surge of pride, a sense of belonging he hadn't experienced in decades. "It's Robert, son," he corrected gently. "And if my country needs me, I'm ready." David smiled, a rare, genuine smile of pride. "I knew you would be, Dad." The incident in the diner, initially a humiliating assault, had become an unexpected catalyst, a bridge between a forgotten past and a new, vital future for Robert. He hadn't sought the limelight, but it had found him, proving that true heroism never truly retires. The quiet dignity he had shown in the face of aggression was now being acknowledged on a much larger stage, a validation of a lifetime of service. The diner slowly began to return to its usual hum. Ashley, wiping away a stray tear, started clearing the shattered mug, a symbolic cleansing of the negative energy. The other patrons, emboldened by the turn of events, began to chat amongst themselves, a newfound respect and admiration for Robert evident in their whispers. The scent of fresh coffee began to replace the lingering smell of burnt grounds. Robert, holding his newly served coffee, felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the temperature of the mug. It was the warmth of purpose, of being seen, truly seen, after so long. He looked at David, his son, who had arrived not just as a protector, but as a messenger of a new chapter. "So," Robert began, a mischievous twinkle in his eye, "does this new advisory role come with a private jet, or do I still have to wait in line at the airport?" David chuckled, shaking his head. "Knowing the Pentagon, Dad, probably both, depending on the day. But I assure you, it'll be a comfortable seat." Suddenly, another unexpected figure emerged from the back of the diner. It was Martha, the diner owner, a stern but kind woman in her 60s, who had been hiding in the kitchen, too scared to intervene earlier. She walked directly to Robert's table, her eyes still red, but her chin held high. "Mr. Miller," she said, her voice cracking slightly, I'm so sorry. I should have done something. We all should have." Robert reached out and gently patted her hand. "Martha, you did what you could. Fear is a powerful thing. But today, courage found its way." She nodded, tears finally flowing freely. "You're a true hero, Robert. The coffee's on me. For life." A few customers overheard and cheered, a ripple of warmth spreading through the diner. This small act of kindness, this genuine acknowledgement, meant more to Robert than any medal. It was a recognition from his community, the people he had lived among for years, unnoticed. As the morning continued, news of the incident, embellished with details that grew grander with each retelling, spread like wildfire through the small town. By lunchtime, reporters from local news channels, alerted by the sudden police activity and the unusual military presence, started to arrive, their cameras flashing. Commander Miller, anticipating this, discreetly instructed his team to handle the media, ensuring his father's privacy while confirming the broad strokes of the incident and Robert's decorated military background. Robert, enjoying his coffee, watched the commotion with a calm detachment, a veteran of much larger, more significant battles. He knew the fleeting nature of public attention, but he also recognized the importance of the moment for his town, for demonstrating that standing up for what's right still mattered. He was no longer just an old man in a diner, he was a symbol, a reminder of forgotten values. The irony was not lost on him. A simple act of aggression had inadvertently unveiled a quiet hero and set a new course for his twilight years. The future, once a quiet, predictable path, was now wide open, filled with the promise of purpose, dignity, and perhaps, a few more unexpected adventures. The coffee, he decided, had never tasted better.